So on March 3rd, 2010, my mom and I were supposed to go look for wedding invitations for my sister, seeing as she was getting married in 2 months, but she was in her final semester at college and couldn't do any of those details for herself since she was out of town. And I had just gotten home from school that day. I was in my second semester of college and I was bored, so I started flipping through cable channels until a lot of time had passed and I realized my mom was way late. So I texted her and I was like, hey, we're gonna miss our appointment, where are you at? And there was no response. So I kind of just threw it over my shoulder and I was like, okay, it's no big deal, it's whatever. And so about another 30 minutes passes by and I text her again. I was like, hey, Mom, we're really late. Like, where the heck are you and what's going on? And she still wasn't responding, so then I tried calling her, but she would hang up immediately every time. So at this point, I start freaking out and worst case scenario started flooding my brain. So I called my dad and I said, Dad, what the heck is going on? Is Mom at the office? Because she's not answering her calls, she's not answering the text messages, and this is extremely out of character for her. And immediately my dad responds, Lo, I'm sorry, there's been a family emergency, you're just gonna have to wait, Mom will be back later. And that's when I knew something was horribly wrong, because my family isn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but we never have family emergencies. So I tried to numb my brain by flipping through more TV channels and it's just not working. And even the TV shows are showing like horrible scenarios and family disasters and all this other stuff, so it's just not helping my case at all. And then finally I hear the garage door creaking open and I jump out of the couch and I'm like, oh my gosh, thank God, like she's home, she's okay, like nothing happened. Except it's not my mom that walks through the door, it's my pastor's wife. And when she came in, I knew something was horribly wrong because she never comes in unannounced or uninvited. And I looked at her and I saw she'd been crying and I just was shaking my head like, what's going on? Like, what's wrong? Like, why are you here? And behind her, my mom comes in. And my mom always looks very professional. My mom always looks very beautiful. Except she looked like a horrible disaster. Her hair was all messed up, her makeup was completely just all over her face and wiped off, her face was bright red, and she was sobbing more than she was breathing. And at that point I knew somebody died. And I just looked at her and I looked at my pastor's wife and I said, what the heck is going on? And they just stared at me. And I again said, what the heck is going on and why is nobody talking to me? Like, why is nobody saying anything? And my pastor's wife just looks at my mom like, are you going to tell her or should I? And that's when my mom finally choked it out. And my mom said, Lo, I'm very sorry, but Auntie Susan's gone. And I just looked at her and I said, gone? What do you mean gone? Like, she's gone on vacation? She's gone on a road trip? Like, I know Auntie Susan's weird, Mom, but what the heck does gone even mean? Like, you're not making sense right now. And my mom looked at me and she just starts weeping and she said, Lo, she's gone. Auntie Susan committed suicide today. And at that point, I lost it. And I just looked at her and I said, you're kidding. You're not being serious right now, Mom. Stop joking. This isn't funny anymore. And my mom said, Lauren, I'm not joking. Auntie Susan committed suicide and she's dead. And at that point, I just got hit with extreme amounts of shame and extreme amounts of guilt, because every single day I would drive to school and I would drive right by her house. And every single day I would drive by that stupid house, I would tell myself, you need to go talk to Auntie Susan. You need to go see Auntie Susan. You need to go check up on Auntie Susan. You need to call her. You need to email her. You need to do something. You live in the same city and you have your entire lives. She was never allowed to have kids, and the one time she got pregnant, she had a miscarriage. And ever since then, she told me and my sister that we were her kids. But I didn't treat her like a mom. And so when it happened and I found out that she was gone, I locked myself in my room and I couldn't say anything. I didn't want to see anyone. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I didn't want anything to do with anyone, because I was like, how can she be gone? Like, it didn't hit me that my aunt wasn't really there anymore. And it definitely didn't hit me that my aunt wasn't there anymore because she decided to take her own life. And it definitely didn't help that 3 days prior to all this, I had just finished my 10-year-long battle with my own war against suicide. Because 6 months prior to all this, I was at a different college in a different city where I was horribly depressed to the point where I would skip school, I wouldn't talk to people, I didn't have a lot of friends, and the few friends I did have, I was constantly fighting with. My grades were slipping horribly because I would skip class. I never slept, and if I did sleep, I had horrible nightmares to the point where I didn't want to sleep anymore, and I just gave up. So in September of 2009, I tried to commit suicide twice, but couldn't cut. Skin wouldn't rip, nothing would happen. And for 30 minutes I just sat there just like terrified and just overwhelmed and angry and just flooded with emotions and feeling like nobody cared about me and feeling like nobody would even miss me if I wasn't there anymore. But I failed at life and then I failed at suicide, so I was kind of like, crap, I'm a huge failure. I suck at everything. And as I'm sitting there just moping, my sister called me. My sister's like, dude, where are you? Like, what's going on? Like, just tell me where you're at and I'll come find you, I'll come meet you. And the only reason I'm alive today is because my sister came and found me. And so that day when my aunt died, I just thought of that night when my sister came and found me, and I just couldn't shake that guilt of why didn't I go find my aunt? Why didn't I go reach out to her when someone reached out to me? Like, why didn't I go help someone else? That's what you're supposed to do, right? You're supposed to pay it forward. You're supposed to do something nice when someone does something nice for you. But I couldn't even do this for my own family. And so I was just horribly ridden with all this just guilt and extreme shame. And it definitely didn't help that 3 days prior to all this, I had just beaten my own battle by finding my own will and drive and hope to think that maybe my life does exist for a reason and maybe I do have a purpose and I just have yet to see it. And there's way too many people today that are suicidal. Between the ages of 10 and 24 years old, there's 5,400 people in America alone that will attempt suicide every single day. And of the 200 people that do attempt every single hour, at least one will succeed. And that's just in America alone. While Seattle, Washington has been rumored to be the #1 city in America for suicide, it's actually only ranked number 6. The #1 city in America for ranked for suicide is actually Sin City, Las Vegas, Nevada, which also has the tagline of the place where people go to die. The reason being, people go to gamble thinking that they can gamble away their life savings and gain some money back, which will get them out of trouble. But the problem is a lot of times they lose all that money, which means they lose all their hope and they lose all their will to live. And once they've lost the will to live, they'll go back to their casinos, where our Las Vegas cops and housekeepers are the ones that clean up the mess because they're too scared to go home and tell their families what they've done. Bill Mayer once said that a suicidal basically tells God when they do it, you can't fire me from this life because I'm quitting. And Anderson Cooper once said, no matter how good a life a suicidal has led, the last thing you'll remember and the only thing that will come to mind is how they ended it. And sadly, that's way too true. With all the good memories I have of my aunt, the main one that keeps coming to my mind is the story my mom would later tell me of how my aunt called my mom while my mom was at work saying, please tell my daughters I love them. And about 15 minutes later, my aunt would die in my mom's arms. It's hard for me to remember the days when she swung me around as a kid. It's hard for me to remember the days where we would talk about Labrador retrievers and Mustangs and how she taught me how to swim and all these other good memories. And every time I think of those things, I always think of how she died and how she quit. My aunt tried to commit suicide 7 times before, but it was this last time where she truly lost the will to live. The problem with true suicidals is they don't actually cry out for help because they don't think it exists anymore. Because they've lost the will to live and they've lost so much hope that they just give up. And rather than even trying to fight anymore, they just continue to live life until day by day, hour by hour, everything that they have left to live is gone. And I know a lot of people argue up there, well, you don't understand how hard it is, or you don't understand the pain I go through, you don't understand this or that. And it's true, I don't. I'll never understand what everybody feels like because I'm not everybody else. But I do understand that from a suicidal's perspective, the pain that is left behind by someone who loses someone is far greater than the pain that the suicidal themselves are going through when they try to commit it. Because when you're trying to commit suicide, all you can think about is how your life is so horrible and how your life sucks so badly, but you don't think about the people that are left behind when you're gone. And unfortunately, a lot of people out there are creating these new foundations and all these different things that really do have a heart behind it to change it and to see suicide diminished and destroyed. But all too often I can't help but wonder if that's actually idolizing it to a point where other people will think, well, no one will love me until I'm dead. The problem with a suicidal person is not that they don't necessarily not feel loved, it's that they can't recognize it. My family loved me, but I didn't see it. Just like my family loved my aunt, but she never saw it either. But my sister was persistent, and she decided to run after me and to chase after me and call me up because she had a gut instinct that said, you need to check up on Lauren. And because of my sister's one gut instinct, I'm still alive today. But I ignored dozens of gut instincts that said you need to call your aunt. And the final time that I did actually call her cell phone was the day after she had died, because I was so desperate to hear her voice that I would just listen to her voicemail over and over and over again. The youngest reported suicide is 6 years old, and that's of a little girl who got in a fight with her mom and was put in timeout. And it makes me wonder how on earth a 6-year-old would even know what suicide is, much less that she would want to do such a thing. Phil Donahue once said that suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And it's true. We all have temporary problems, but sometimes they seem like permanent forevers. So if you really want to change the world and if you really want to help somebody, you should start loving them for who they are, not who you think they should be. Because I was busy enough with my own problems trying to become someone I never was, which is what led me to become suicidal like I was. But because my sister saw I was my own individual person, she started loving me as such and reaching out to me as if I was already that person when I was still on the journey to become her. The problem with teenagers today is they have a lot of gut instincts, but they're told to ignore them. Or they're told to follow a dream that's not even theirs to begin with, because their parents are pressuring them to be someone they're not. But if you actually start loving someone for who they are and who they were created to be, even if they're not that person yet, then they'll start to see themselves in a different light. And that's when they start seeing the hope, and that's when they start seeing the future, and that's when they start believing for themselves that the sun is going to come out tomorrow and maybe things are going to get better. Suicidals don't need people to tell them what's right and wrong. They don't need people to throw down Jesus or to throw in scriptures down their throat. They just need somebody to love them. And love doesn't always look like answers or counselors or medication, which that all does help, but sometimes it just makes it worse. The only thing that can really heal a heart that's already sick is to just continue to love it until the heart starts beating again, to believe that it actually does belong somewhere. Because that's all teenagers want. That's all anybody wants, is to just believe they belong. So rather than rejecting each other, we need to start loving one another and believing that we all belong here on this earth, since we were all born here, which means we must all have a purpose somewhere, somehow. But instead we just bully each other, and we just beat each other up, and we just tell each other, you don't matter. We're our own worst enemies. But it's time we become our own best heroes. We all want to be Spider-Man, but even Spider-Man loved someone before he became the superhero we all loved him to be.